guys, it's Gretchen and welcome back to my channel. So it is that time of the month again where I answer your body mod questions. I take questions here on YouTube as well as over on Instagram. If you would like a question answered in October's body mod Q&A, you can either leave them in the comments below. When I do that video, I'll only look at the comments on this video, or you could send me a question over on Instagram when I put the little question bubble up in my stories. These videos sometimes get a little long, so I'm just gonna stop explaining now how they work and get on into the questions. I am gonna start with the ones from YouTube first and then get to the Instagram ones. Linda Pie asks, my septum was pierced at a 14 gauge. Am I supposed to size down to 16 gauge? My piercer didn't say anything about that, but I'm worried because lots of jewelry sites barely sell any good 14 gauge things for the septum. It's only 4 months old, so once it heals, can I swap between 14 and 16 gauge jewelry, or will it shrink down to the 16 gauge? So really this depends on your preference. Yes, there are more things at a 16 gauge for the septum because that's like the standard for what it's pierced at, but it all depends on what you're interested in. If you want to keep it at a 14 gauge, you're going to want to stay with 14 gauge jewelry. You're not going to want to flip flop back and forth between 16 and 14. If you go from a 14 to a 16, it will shrink down with it. But it really depends on what you want. My conch, for instance, was pierced at a 14 gauge. Typically, conch is pierced at a 16 gauge, much like the rest of any cartilage or helix piercing. They're typically 16 gauge. My conch was at a 14. I ended up liking that size, so I stuck with it. Same thing with your septum. It's pierced at a 14. Go with what your preference is. So if you want to have a little bit more options, maybe the 16 gauge is good for you, but if you like the size, stick with 14. Velazara Ristova says, hi Gretchen, I'm a side sleeper and I really want to get my conch and or helix pierced. Do you have any tips on how I can continue to sleep on both sides without irritating new piercings? Love your videos. So I am a side sleeper myself. Even after a piercing has quote unquote healed, it'll flare up because it doesn't like me sleeping on it. The best thing that I can offer is to get yourself a travel pillow, you know, one of those ones that go around your neck. At that point, you can put your ear, whichever ear it is, into like the hole of the travel pillow, and then that way there's nothing pressing on the ear, especially during the healing phase. That's probably my biggest suggestion. It's a little tip and trick that I actually learned here on YouTube way before I started getting into YouTube and doing it myself. A lot of people said if you're a side sleeper and you've gotten a brand new piercing, get a travel pillow, put your ear in the hole, and sleep that way. It may be a little uncomfortable at first. When I first tried it, I'm like, oh my God, like it hardly covers my head. I'm gonna like roll around. But then you kind of get used to it. And then if it's on top of another pillow, like your pillow can wrap around the travel pillow. Does that make any kind of sense? So that's my biggest tip. Also, if you find that you don't really want to do that, you find yourself like being a back sleeper, but then you roll over onto your side, you can get like those body pillows on either side of you that just kind of hold you in place. Haven't had much luck with that myself, but I know some people do it. NoCoho1 says, what do you do for insanely persistent piercing bumps? I got my daith pierced 7 months ago. I'm good with my aftercare, sterile saline once a day and warm water in the morning. Bumps have stayed for 4 months. Any tips for really persistent bumps? My piercer is still closed from COVID. So persistent bumps are a pain in the butt. I totally understand it. I'm currently dealing with a persistent piercing. I don't even want to call it a bump. It's just pissed, and it's my forward helix, so I totally understand it. Continue with your aftercare. You may find that your aftercare is irritating it more than helping it, so make sure if you're doing your own kind of wash, make sure that you're doing the correct measurements. Make sure that you're not overly irritating it. I personally had struggles with my daith stuff. You can go watch that video if you want. I don't recommend what I did in it, but that's how I healed it. Just continue with your aftercare. Try some warm compresses on it. I know that's kind of a hard space to get in there. Hopefully your piercer will open back up soon. I know here in Virginia, the majority have opened back up, so I'm hoping yours will open back up so that you can actually go in and get them to look at it. It could be irritation from the type of jewelry you have. I know my last resort at one point was I had a piercing bump on a nostril piercing, and I went to a dermatologist and they shot it with cortisone, I believe, and it disappeared. Again, last resort, but also something to keep in the back of your mind. Jaybird says, my helix was pierced with a gun at Claire's roughly a year ago. I just turned 18 and my mom wouldn't take me anywhere else, and it's finally getting to the point that it's healed enough to change. My only problem is that I don't know exactly what gauge the stud is. Do you happen to know the standard gauge of piercing gun jewelry? I want to say because I don't think they have like separate piercing guns at Claire's for just lobes and cartilage. I think it's all the same. I want to say it's either a 20 or an 18. I don't think they go above an 18. More than likely, it was a 20 or an 18. So if you want to go up, you're gonna have to do a little bit of stretching. Not unbearable. I'm thinking that's what the standard is 20 and 18. I'm pretty sure it's not anything above an 18. Anyone that works at Claire's want to verify that? Anyone at Claire's not want to pierce with a gun? Mega Ruru123 asks, what was your first tattoo and piercing you got? So my first tattoo was my book on my wrist right here. I got that, I don't even remember what year it was now, but I got it, it was probably like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I don't remember, I've lost track of time. But this was my first tattoo. So my first piercing other than lobes was technically a helix piercing. It was over on this side. I have since taken that out because that was done at Claire's when I was 17. It didn't end well. But aside from that, my first piercing was my nostril. I think it was this one or this one. It was this one. It was my right one. And then that's all she wrote. Diane Chan asks, would you get your eyebrow pierced? I would. I'd probably get this one so that, like, you see how my side bangs cover it? I would probably get this one done, and then that way I could easily just pull my hair down in front of it and cover it up and no one would see it. And the only reason why I haven't is just because it is a more prominent and noticeable piercing facially, whereas like my septum, my Medusa, my nostrils aren't quite as bam in your face as say a curved barbell would be over there. And I work in an amazing environment. They're very good with my body mods, but I don't always want to like keep pressing the boundaries. I would get it done, but I won't. At least not now. Elliot O asks, I know you've said your boyfriend isn't into body mods, but if you could choose some for him, what would they be? Ooh, this is a really good question and a really cool one. Tattoos are a little bit more personal, so if I could choose one for him, it would be something music related, since that's what he's really into. If you don't know, he has a music YouTube channel, so go check it out. But for tattoos, I would probably just pick something music related, you know, a favorite lyric of his or just some kind of illustration of his favorite bands, just like incorporated somehow, or a bass guitar because that's what he plays. But that's a little bit more personal, so I'd really leave it up to him. I'd just come up with like a broad idea and then let him go with it. Piercing wise though, totally at least one lobe done. I'd also really be interested to see his nostril pierced. None of that will happen. He's just not interested, so it's fine. We respect that. Toxophyllite asks, how do you clean new jewelry you purchased online before using it? I suspect I might be overdoing it. I typically will just take the jewelry out of the bag and I will take H2 Ocean or Neomed or whatever prepackaged spray that I have and just spray it down and just like let it sit there and then rinse it off and then go for it. Pretty simple stuff. Some people will make their own solution and drop the jewelry in there. Totally fine too. Just make sure that you know your correct measurements with the water and the salt. Don't overdo it there. But basically just how you would clean a piercing site, that's how you could clean your jewelry. Amy Mulkey asks, I got my conch pierced 1 year ago. I bought a traveling neck pillow to sleep on since I'm a side sleeper. I'm still having to use it while I sleep. How long did it take for you to be able to sleep on your ear with your conch again? So with my conch, it didn't take too long. With ones like my forward helix or my tragus, it took a lot longer. My body is dumb, and so like I'll start off on the side that doesn't have the new piercing, and then I'll wake up in the morning and I've switched sides and I'm like, really? Help a girl out, come on. It took me, I don't know, I think maybe 4 months for me to be able to like comfortably sleep on a piercing again. Not necessarily my conch. My conch was like a dream to heal. Worst case scenario, it took like 4 months for me to sleep on the side with my forward helix, and even then it still gets irritated from time to time. The travel pillow helps, you know, just keep that pressure off and keep that irritation off and keep that rubbing off. But maybe if you just switch to the other side, like are you predominantly one side over the other, or is it just like a side? It doesn't matter. Go to the side that doesn't have the piercing. Eline Cormans asks, how is your latest tragus piercing doing? It's doing all right. It randomly like got crusty the other day. That hadn't happened for a while, so I just, you know, took my Neomed, sprayed it with a Q-tip, cleaned around it, and it's fine now. I don't know if I bumped it or something, because it was like not like that typical crusty. It had like a little bit of like dried blood in there, so I don't know if I accidentally bumped it, but it's okay now. It just had a little hiccup and it was just like, I didn't like that. So I'm gonna let you know that I didn't like that, but it's cool now. We made up. Demka Belikov asks, how much did the tattoo of lyrics by your elbow hurt? I'm thinking of getting a tattoo there sometime. So for those that are unaware, the reference and area we're discussing is over here near the ditch. When I got the lyrics done, didn't hurt at all. So I mistakenly went into this tattoo, my hedgehog over here, thinking it was gonna be along the same lines. No, it's not. It depends on the area of the ditch that you're gonna get something done in. If you're just gonna get it done like below the ditch line, this is technically the ditch right here. So if you get it below the ditch line, I didn't think it was too bad. But if you were gonna go straight into the ditch, it hurts bad. I was probably the one and only time that I've gotten very close to just telling my tattoo artist to rip my arm off. It hurt. Clojo123 asks, what is a place you would never get a tattoo? Like on my body? I don't think there's any like place that I would be totally against. I think there are places that I'm very hesitant on just because the pain possibility scares me. There's a reason why I haven't gotten my feet tattooed yet, just because there's literally no flesh down there. It's just skin and your bones. So that scares me. Ribs scare me, though there is a little bit more meat there at least. My stomach scares me. Maybe that's an area that'll probably be like a last one, is getting like my stomach. Like my hips are one thing, but like my stomach area, that would probably be an area that either wouldn't get done or it would be like the last place I get done. Orla RJ asks, advice for healing first tattoo. I've done several videos on healing a tattoo. I just did one recently, so you can go check it out over here. Ash the Baron asks, when were you able to stop babying your Medusa and do big smooches? My Medusa really did quite well. I think it only formed a tiny bump on the backside once, and even then it disappeared in less than a week. I didn't baby it for very long. I think maybe 2 months of babying and then just like keeping up with aftercare routine for another 4 months after that. So 6 months total, which I do with any piercing. Fedline asks, if you're pierced at a larger gauge and you switch jewelry to a smaller gauge, will it shrink? So going back to a question earlier in the video, yes, it will. So if you're pierced at a 14 gauge and you decide to put 16 gauge jewelry in there, the piercing site is going to shrink down to it. Now, if it's cartilage, if you get it pierced at a 14 gauge, the hole is 14 gauge. However, skin will start to like shrink down around it. So yes, it will shrink. Lisa FE asks, how often can you get a new piercing? Did a double helix 3 months ago, now I want a rook. You should be okay at this point. It depends on like what ear. 3 months is a pretty good amount of time, especially if you're like getting the opposite ear done. It should be fine. But it also depends on how your healing has gone with your double helix. Candid Cam asks, do O-rings get easier to put on at bigger sizes? I'm at a 12 gauge, or will I suffer like this forever? Well, first of all, thanks to my best friend for asking a question. I definitely find that the larger the size, the easier it is to put O-rings on. That being said, O-rings are a pain in the patukas. My fingers are just always slippery after, because you know, got the lube going on with your ears, the salve, whatever you want to call it, and it's just like all over, and you're trying to get the O-rings on, and you're like, this is a pain in the butt. But I have found that the larger the size, the easier it is to get them on. Janice Kyles 1027 asks, any plans for a new tattoo? Yes. I actually have 2 tattoo appointments coming up for the rest of this year. One at the end of October, I'm getting a little chickadee put in here. And then one at the beginning of December, and I'm getting like this man face tattooed on the back of my, which one did I say? I think my left calf. I'm very excited for both. Rabbit on Quack asks, thought this might be a fun one. If you could only keep one piercing, what would you choose and why? All right, I'm gonna give myself 2. One for facial and then one for ears, so I'm kind of cheating. Ears, conch, definitely. Love my conch so much. Face-wise, probably my septum. I really love my septum. I love my philtrum / Medusa, but I really love my septum. There's just something about a septum piercing that I absolutely just love. Payola94A asks, I'd really want a conch, but I've only my lobes pierced. Is it a step too harsh? Honestly, I don't think so. I mean, for me, my conch was pretty easy, so I don't think that would be too harsh of a step. Go for it. If you're feeling it, do your research so that you know what you're in for, but I think it's a fine step. And the last question is, Horse Mad Lily asks, is a rhino piercing a good idea? I kind of want one, but look very painful and not sure if it would reject. A rhino meaning the one on the tip of your nose. So I will insert a picture of a rhino piercing over here so that you can see what one looks like. Basically, it's through the tip of your nose and then it comes out here. At least that's what all the pictures are showing. I'm not very well versed in that piercing. I would imagine that would be a real pill to heal. I don't know. I don't have any personal experience. So if anyone with that piercing has any advice, tips, just want us to talk about it, leave them in the comments below because I'd be interested. Probably wouldn't get one done now because of, you know, everything going on in the world and we all have to wear face masks or should be wearing face masks. And if you're not, what's wrong with you? It doesn't look like that it would have a really high success rate. But if that's something you're interested in, just make sure that you do your research. Hopefully someone in the comments below will provide some insight. But yeah, do your research and go to a piercer that you trust. So that is it for September's Body Mods Q&A. Thank you again to everyone who submitted a question. If you have questions that you'd like to submit for October's Q&A, leave them in the comments below or follow me on Instagram or Twitter so that you can ask there. Also, if you have anything that you want to add to any of the questions that were asked, you can leave them in the comments below as well. But that is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a big ol' thumbs up. Go down there and hit that subscribe button, wherever it may be, because I don't know. Even though I do, this is just my shtick now. Also hit that notification bell in case you want to know when I upload, and in case YouTube wants to let you know when I upload, because I would really appreciate it. And until next time, bye guys.